Okay, I think that we can start sharing the intro slides. Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome. It's great to see you, so many of you joining us today. And as you've probably noticed, we have a slightly bigger group than usual. And that's because today's the group from the two schools are coming together for this webinar. So we have participants from both programs in the same virtual room, which is wonderful. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, I have a few important reminders before we dive into today's topic. First of all, make sure that you filled out the food choices form. I think most of you have done it, but especially if you have allergies or food intolerances, we need to know to liaise accordingly with the hotel. Also, if you need assisted taxis from your ride from the airport, you can use the companies shared with you on these slides. The links are also on the training webpage, and you can always send us an email if you need more information about how to get in touch with them. But it's pretty straightforward. They have a forum on their websites where you can book your ride. Next, the face-to-face training program has been updated with the final version, so you can go to the training webpage to check the latest version online. And remember that we have the welcome dinner on Monday. You are all invited, and we've taken your allergies and food intolerances into consideration for that as well, and we are really looking forward to that. Next slide. We will also start collecting all your profile pics for the booklet that you'll receive at the start of the face-to-face training. This year, we've created a participants booklet, like a participants profile booklet with your bios, and we want to add a profile pic as much as possible. So you can send it to me via email. You have, I don't know, a couple of weeks to do so. And for now, in the meantime, on the training webpage, you have a full list of participants, but without the email addresses for now. Next slide. And yeah, we also want to invite you to participate in the patient engagement sessions that we've planned on Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning. These sessions are a unique opportunity to get to know you better. And we'd really love for you to share your story, how you, for example, how you started your advocacy journey, what you are most proud of, where you see yourself now as a patient advocate, and what your near future goals are. Just a few ideas. A few participants will be selected to give short presentations. So yeah, don't miss that opportunity. It's a great session that everybody enjoys so much. After the webinar, we'll send an email with more information if you're interested, and a form where you can write your story, but very briefly, so we have an idea what you're going to talk about, and then we'll get back to you with further information. All right, next slide. Yeah, want to mention the next webinars. Next slide. Yeah, before I hand over to today's speakers, I want to remind you about the upcoming webinars for each school. The next webinar for the Medicine Research and Development School will take place on the 16th of March and is about the advocacy context in the approval of new medicines, and we'll also give you some information in preparation for the training week. And for the Scientific Innovation and Translational Research School, we're going to present you the Erdera Consortium and how you can build partnerships in research within Erdera. All right, it's going to take place the 12th of March. Next slide. And finally, we've added a joint webinar on the 30th of April about gene and advanced therapy. You'll have a session on this topic on the face-to-face training, and we thought it would be better to do a webinar beforehand so you can cover all the fundamentals so you arrive at the session better prepared. And yeah, next slide. And now moving to today's webinar. Today we'll be exploring a very important and increasingly relevant topic, drug repurposing for rare diseases. As many of you know, developing new therapies from scratch is incredibly time-consuming and expensive. For rare diseases in particular, the traditional drug development model often doesn't work well, and drug repurposing offers a different pathway. We'll cover that today with Beacon for rare diseases, and I think we can stop sharing because we'll let today's speakers introduce themselves. Rick and Megan, who's I don't know who's starting first, but whenever you guys ready, you can start.
Okay, amazing. Hi everyone. I am Megan. It's great to see faces. Normally, when I do this, it's a blank screen, so it's great to actually be able to see everyone's faces. And thanks for joining. So, I am Senior Scientific Projects Officer at Beacon. Just a little bit of context about Beacon. We're a small UK rare disease charity. Our main focus is to support patient groups, rare disease patient groups. So we upskill them through training. We bring them together through community initiatives, and that's our main focus. We're also involved in a bigger project called Remedy for All, which we'll talk to you a bit about today. But the focus of my talk this morning is going to be a bit of an overview of drug repurposing for rare diseases. So, as I just said, the aims really is to understand why repurposing is relevant to the rare disease community, to understand the evolution of the repurposing landscape and the different types of support that are currently available for repurposing research, to introduce Remedy for All and the Remedy for All approach to patient engagement in its repurposing work, to examine examples of successful rare disease repurposing projects. And so myself and Rick will be taking you through this today. So to begin, what is drug repurposing? To put simply, very simply, drug repurposing is finding new therapeutic uses for an existing medicine. So taking a medicine that's been developed to treat one condition and using it to treat a different condition. Repurposed drugs have potential to get to patients faster. They're often cheaper to produce because you can skip a lot of the early phases of drug design and development. There are a lot of examples of successful repurposing projects, and these are across a whole range of indications. So, for example, semaglutide, a lot of you may have heard of GLP-1, the glucagon-like 1 protein, also known as Ozempic. This was initially used for improving glycemic control in adults with type 2 diabetes, was then found to actually be really good for weight management, and then its new indication is for weight management. Another example, sirolimus, an immunosuppressant used to prevent organ rejection in organ transplants, repurposed to treat a autoimmune lymphoproliferative syndrome, ALPS, which is an ultra-rare blood disorder. There are loads of examples out there of successful cases. So the journey from concept to making a repurposed drug available is rarely linear. So, but it does typically follow like several common milestones. So the first stage is identifying the drug to repurpose. So there are lots of ways to do this. One good approach is through using drug screens. So companies nowadays produce what are called compound libraries, where you can get 50, hundreds, thousands of FDA or clinically approved drugs that then you can test on a disease to see if they have the biological effect that is needed. AI approaches as well, computational approaches. There's loads of different innovative approaches these days to identify a drug to repurpose. And then the next stage is proving that this drug is effective in cell models, proving that it's effective in animal models, again, trying to get this desired biological effect. So repurposed drugs also will go through clinical trials. So you need to prove that the drug is safe and effective for new use in humans. As I mentioned before, you can sometimes skip certain stages of this because um, some companies will give you their clinical trial data that you can then see and to assess safety. So then essentially all you need to do is assess efficacy, but clinical trials are also a big
Dit
part of
spreekwoord geven.
repurposing. And then finally, you need to identify effective and appropriate routes to market. So why do this? Why not just create a new drug, find a new drug? Why do we go through the process of repurposing? Well, I'm just going to give you some stats initially to talk about why this is important. So in rare diseases, access to treatments is a challenge, remains a challenge. So we know there are over 6,000 unique rare diseases that exist, affecting 3.5 to 5.9% of the population. And despite this, only 5% of rare diseases have improved treatment. So 1 in 3 patients have no access to medicines. Treatments cost 7 times more than common conditions. In the UK, around half of approved rare disease drugs are not being reimbursed. This differs slightly across Europe. I think Germany are doing quite well with around 80%, but the average in the EU is about 65% of drugs being reimbursed. So there's still this big challenge here for patients accessing rare disease treatments. So in general, any given rare disease has its challenges. A small number of researchers or clinicians working on a project, small fragmented patient populations, limited understanding of the disease natural history, limited knowledge of disease pathways, disease mechanisms, no existing treatments, and often no clinical care pathways as well. And this means that research is really challenging. There are a lot of unknowns about the disease. And sometimes this means that if you can work with a drug that's already well understood, it's going to make the whole process a lot easier. It's going to remove some of that uncertainty in the development process, which is why we do repurposing. So, to put simply, drug development is hard. It's a long process, it's a difficult process. This quite complicated diagram takes you through the stages from unmet need all the way around to patient care. We can break it up into different stages. So drug discovery, understanding the disease knowledge, identifying targets, getting products developed, and then preclinical phases. So the non-clinical proof of principles, your animal models, your studies, and then getting it ready for human use. And then the clinical phases, so the human proof of concept, like I said, the clinical trials, and establishing this really pivotal data that means that it's safe and efficacious to use in humans. And then the market access phase, so getting market authorization, health technology assessments, reimbursements. Overall, this process can take a long time. So drug discovery can take anywhere from 3 to 5 years, preclinical testing 1 to 2, clinical trials anywhere from 6 to 7 years, and the regulatory approval anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So essentially around 16 years to get one new drug. Repurposing changes this. So we can cut down time by removing the preclinical stages. We can reduce the number, so we can reduce the number of compounds tested. We can also use existing data, which means that we can reduce the length of time for preclinical and clinical testing. As a question, I don't know if you want to do questions now or at the end. I'm happy either way.
I think Donatella has raised her hand.
Yeah.
Donatella, would you like to say something? If you can unmute.
Shall,
Ah,
shall I speak?
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, because 16 years is quite a long time, if there have been any exceptions to this length of time to develop a product for the market, maybe during the COVID time, or something has changed, or it's, from your point of view, it's always like this, that it takes at least 16 years or an average of 16 years to develop a product.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, these are just kind of, I suppose, average numbers. I think Probably the time that you can't save would be the clinical trial phases. I would suspect you can't, you have to get the safety and the efficacy data. I mean, in terms of if I just go back, like the discovery phase, probably that would be where you could save time, maybe in the preclinical as well. I haven't got an example off the top of my head. I think a lot of COVID stuff they did. I think they were doing repurposing as well, which probably is why they saved time on that. I don't know if Rick's unmuted. I don't know if he's got any thoughts.
Yeah, completely. I think a lot of the things that were changed in COVID was because actually they were trying to repurpose medicines
Yeah.
and trying to shortcut things as much as possible. And that really raised the prevalence and profile of repurposing during the time because it does allow you to get more quickly to that clinical stage. I think if you're looking to develop a drug from scratch, 16 years is probably still quite a good outcome in truth. And the time can be really quite much longer than this. It can be shorter in times, but it's really hard to pin down. But just the sheer volume of science that you're working through to get something that can reach patients is quite high. I will get close to the microphone next time. Sorry, Michael.
Thanks, Rick. But yeah, a really good point and a great question. But yeah, essentially what we're trying to do with repurposing is to use this existing data, reduce these numbers, and ultimately reduce the time that it takes. Yeah, Maria, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering because since you're gonna take the drug that is already existing for a specific disease and you're gonna treat other people like other patients of other disease with this drug, but you still need to do clinical trials. And of course, you can use the existing data, but at the same time, if you are using that drug for other purposes, how is this like time reduced? I don't understand how.
So I know sometimes that you can get hold of safety data, which I think can cut out a big chunk of the time. But yeah, you're right. If you do reformulations and things like that, you will have to go through the whole process.
Yeah. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's slightly better now.
It does come down to the type of drug that you're repurposing. So if you were working with a drug that's been widely available for a long time, there's often quite extensive safety data on the use of that drug in lots of different patient populations. So in that scenario, you often have a really good understanding of how that drug interacts with a range of different conditions, different age profiles, and that can really streamline the need for extensive safety studies in humans at repurposing. So that means you can actually accelerate and move your way much more quicker to the phase 2 stage. If you're working with a drug that's still on label, that's been used in a very limited patient population, you really would need to conduct much more safety information in that new population to understand its impact in that group. And I think that really comes down to those individual situations. But often we're talking about repurposing, working with drugs that have been widely available for many, many years, and we feel quite confident and safe about how they impact the human body.
Okay, thank you.
There's another question in the chat about animal models.
Mhm.
How can animal models be used in preclinical research if the disease cannot be reproduced in animals?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, a lot of the time from what I've seen is taken up by actually establishing and developing these models. So we've worked with groups that have established like zebrafish models, for example, mouse models. Yeah, I think that is a challenge in itself, and that takes a lot of the time. Okay, so repurposing lowers the barrier to enter research and the time to patient benefit. So essentially, you can start a research program for a condition that potentially no one else would try. There are, however, challenges to drug repurposing. So ideas to validation can be challenging. Validation to patient evidence can be challenging. Running a full clinical trial is challenging. Ultimately, each next stage sometimes feels like it's a little bit more challenging than the previous, like we just discussed. Establishing animal models, all these things, they take time, they have challenges, there'll be setbacks, there'll be drawbacks. Building an attractive business model for market authorization holders and initiating and maintaining relationships with these market authorization holders for access to drugs for trial and beyond. So complications come when drugs have a pattern, if they're not generic, if they're on label. Again, these are all things that need to be considered, and have building this business model from the start is really important to make sure that these projects are successful. Consideration of unique regulatory needs and options for routes to market, something that's really important as well. And then again, challenges in ensuring equity of access to the drug for patients is another common challenge. There is, however, a changing landscape, which is reassuring. In the last few years, the repurposing landscape has begun to evolve quite a lot. So, for example, with new EU pharmaceutical legislation, such as Article 48 and 84, which is this is in the past few years, this legislation has been put in place. So Article 48 is basically a route where you can submit an application for a new indication based on existing evidence that you have. So you take existing clinical data to show that a drug works for a new condition. You can submit this to regulators such as the EMA, and then they can approve this based on the therapeutic information. And then Article 84 enables public bodies such as academic institutes to propose a new therapeutic use for an existing medicine, and then regulators can assess the evidence of this. So legislation that is essentially supporting drug repurposing, which is what we're really keen to see, that it's being considered and thought about, and its relevance and importance is being considered as well. More collaborations between patient groups and academia, between patient groups and industry, between academia and industry. Something that we talk about a lot is collaboration. It's so important for impactful projects, and we are seeing more and more of this nowadays, which is great to see and really important. New opportunities, so AI, literature mining, libraries. You might have heard of an organization called EveryCure, who are doing a lot of work around AI and repurposing to identify drugs to repurpose and models put in place to do this. More repurposing initiatives, programs, and organizations. I'll mention this in a minute, a bit more about this as well. And then also more innovation platforms from industry. So I just mentioned the increase in these platforms and initiatives. So there's a few EU-funded initiatives that might be worthwhile being familiar with. So Sympathic, which is a research consortium whose main focus is this idea that instead of one drug, one disease, they want to look at diseases with shared mechanisms and drugs with shared mechanisms, and use one drug to treat multiple diseases. So they accelerate drug repurposing for rare neurological, neurometabolic, and neuromuscular diseases by exploiting these similarities in clinical and molecular pathology. Repo for EU. They host and grow an EU industry-level online platform for precision drug repurposing, and they have a global reach. And then Remedy for All. So we'll talk a bit more about Remedy for All throughout the webinar, but essentially Remedy for All is a EU repurposing consortium who is building a European patient-centric drug repurposing ecosystem. So the key themes of Remedy for All is to break down scientific, regulatory, policy and economic barriers for a faster and more cost-effective and scientifically robust drug repurposing. So overall, I think hopefully I've highlighted that repurposing, it can be likened to recycling, uses an existing medicine to help more conditions. It's got the potential to reduce time and money spent to bring drugs through to clinical testing. Clinical testing does, however, remain difficult for repurposing, just as with other drug development. And getting repurposed drugs available on the market is also challenging, particularly for medicines that have a long history of human use. And then finally, there are many projects now in operation that support international repurposing efforts. I just mentioned a few, and Rick's going to talk a bit more about Remedy for All as well. So hopefully that was useful. I don't know if anyone has any more questions before I pass over to Rick. Cool. I'm going to stop share so Rick can take over.
Hey, I have turned my microphone up. Is this painful and brutal, or is everyone okay? I'm getting quiet nods and slight smiles, so I'm assuming I'm more audible. And I will
Yeah.
dive in.
It's
Yeah?
definitely better, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Martha. Guys, nice to be here. As Megan says, we don't normally see so many faces. It's really nice to see the faces of you all in the room to learn about repurposing. I am a notoriously fast speaker, so if I'm getting confusing for you, please flag and wave, and I'll try and slow myself down. I'm Rick. I'm CEO at Beacon for Rare Diseases, and we at Beacon, along with Eurodis, have been involved in the Remedy for All project since its inception. And I'm going to take you through this program to start with, before we then go on to talk about some examples of repurposing in rare diseases that have been successful. So hopefully this will move, and I can tell you a bit about Remedy 4 itself. So we are a large international consortium. Here it says we've got 24 organisations, but actually now have 2 new members. So we have 26 organisations within the consortium that have a really diverse spread of expertise across that end-to-end drug repurposing journey. We have people within that consortium that have expertise in some of the AI approaches Megan's mentioned. We have clinical trialists, we have patient engagement, and we have people that think about things like regulation and policy. So a real broad breadth of skills that are needed to take a medicine from concept right through to delivery. And the vision of this group is kind of founded by that EU grant, which supports our work. It is to develop this kind of end-to-end platform to support any repurposing project that's out there, to try and give it more chance to deliver a repurposed medicine that can impact patients, not just that can generate papers or say it helps patients, but actually get a drug that's delivered in the clinic. And that's obviously not an easy thing. Alongside supporting these projects, we're also trying to find ways to evolve the landscape that researchers and patient organisations are working in around drug repurposing. So in particular, trying to shift that policy environment to make it more permissive for drug repurposing. And those article changes for the legislation that Megan mentioned are really positive steps potentially for this space. So all of that comes together to try and help us build this dynamic global community of people with an interest in repurposing, and that really spreads a wide range of stakeholders, and patient groups are fundamental to that success. So I'm going to break down that Remedy for All approach a bit more on these slides here, but essentially, as I've said, we are trying to build this end-to-end project support with experts in all different fields that are pieced together to build a repurposed entity. And as I say, that's really driven through the diversity of stakeholders that are within our consortium and actually our wider network. So that means if you're a project that's stuck in a clinical phase, we can hopefully find someone from our clinical teams who understand how to better design a clinical trial that could work well for repurposing. If you're struggling with access, we can go and refer you to people who know about regulation, etc. We're also, as I say, trying to evolve that policy environment to support those projects. While we've got lots of groups that are trying to quantify and understand the barriers to repurposing and solutions to address those, we also have an active policy board external to the programme that's trying to tackle some of those major issues in drug repurposing and change the landscape over the next few years. Crucial to all this, though, is to have patient centricity within the work we're doing. We want to have a patient-centred approach to our research, and I'll try and represent and explain to you how we're doing that within the project. But really central to all of that is having patient champions that represent any given research project that's moving through the Remedy for All platform. And those individuals are directly connected to a given condition, many of which are rare diseases, to give them the best chance to deliver a drug that can be most effective for the patient community and address the needs that are really there. And the other thing that I think is really crucial is to bring a focus on product development to academic research. I think probably many of us here will have worked with academics at some point, and there's a certain frustration that they're incentivized to publish papers and win grants, but not necessarily to deliver a drug all the way to market that can impact the patient themselves. And that's because that's not how they're trained. And we're trying to help to provide training that supports them to actually think about delivering drugs to market and have tools that can help them have this product focus, which includes the target product profile, something that I'll talk about again in the next few slides. So firstly, looking at patient centricity within Remedy for All, it's never an easy thing to get right. We're trying to find ways to encourage academics who maybe aren't used to working so much with patients to bring them into the heart of research. And we're doing that through a few different tools, but fundamentally we do recognise as a consortium, particularly when working in rare disease repurposing, that having that patient voice and experience in a project from inception gives you the very best chance to deliver a medicine that can actually make a difference to patients that they need. And represents real patient need rather than presumed need that many researchers might think about. So we're trying to develop a kind of series of tools that allow us to deliver best practice patient engagement throughout our projects. And those are 4 tools. The first I've mentioned is to have a patient champion that represents the patient voice and patient need at the heart of all the research we do within our consortium. The second is to give them access and support from patient advocacy groups that they can go to call on additional perspectives and to really address certain questions that need a wider focus for any disease project. We're also running multi-stakeholder meetings to bring together a really diverse range of stakeholders in any condition to make sure we're not limited in the perspectives that we're hearing, and patient groups are always very much at the heart of those meetings. And finally, trying to develop meaningful, well-structured patient engagement plans that say how we're going to do that work and try and measure it and deliver it as we progress. The champions, as I've mentioned, really are key to lots of the work we're doing. And these essentially are individuals that join many of our research development teams or repurposing development teams and sit as an equal stakeholder within repurposing project delivery. So those individuals generally have to be pretty confident, pretty well versed in their ecosystem, because we really want people that are connected to a wide network of people within the rare disease or the disease area we're targeting, that they can be free and comfortable to provide transparent, honest opinions to try and correct the perceptions or misconceptions of the researchers, and hopefully facilitate a really good flow of information from community to the research itself to get us the right kind of research delivered. So they're really crucial to how we're working, and we're hoping that they can help ensure the right direction for Remedy for All projects and repurposing projects we're developing right now and in the future. As I say, they're supported by a patient advisory group. You can see the basic structure in this figure here, but the basic idea is that champion should be able to access wider insights from a patient advisory group, which we've made up of members with different experiences from different parts of the ecosystem or the globe, to make sure we're not focusing on one individual's perspective as a repurposing development team, but having diverse input throughout the program. And the multi-stakeholder meetings are really an extension of this. They allow us to run really dedicated events with a whole range of different advocates across the ecosystem in a collaborative setting. Again, making sure that the patient voice, the patient opinion is on an equal footing and equal level with those researchers, and really making sure that the researchers who think they understand the disease are actively challenged during those meetings by the patient community to make sure the research that we're trying to develop for repurposed medicines is focused on track at addressing their needs. So the picture here shows the first multi-stakeholder meeting we held around pancreatic cancer, but actually our second meeting around osteogenesis imperfecta or brittle bone disease was really effective in this manner, as it helped to highlight that many of the researchers were focused too much on fracture rate as a major outcome for the drug development, but actually that isn't where the community is right now. And fundamentally, the patients want to see drugs that can help manage the burden of pain or fatigue that goes along with OI, and those measures need to be there to demonstrate real patient value. And as a consequence of this meeting, we've really refined the outcomes, the endpoints, and the measures we're making within our clinical trial in OI, trying to make sure it's demonstrating that value to patients, because that ultimately allows us to drive the trial forward and show the value that can mean that drug can reach patients in a meaningful manner. So it's really an effective model that we're really pleased to have had that engagement from the patient community in this example.
Rick, 1 second. There is a question in the chat about patient centricity. Maybe you could take it one now. Maria is asking, are patient centricity and patient engagement synonyms?
Yeah, that's a good question. Broadly speaking, yes, if you like, patient centricity should be a suggestion or a term that's used by research to suggest they're trying to make sure that they have the patient perspective and the patient ideals at the heart of the research they're doing. So they're focused on what the patient needs are rather than the research question that most interests or excites the researcher or company. Patient engagement is the process of going out and eliciting and understanding what those patient needs are, if you like. So they're both kind of sides of the same coin and sides of the same process. They're terms that are thrown around a lot, and I find myself throwing around too. Fundamentally, it should mean going out and talking to people who are affected by a condition and thinking about them when you're doing research, and that shouldn't be so complex. Obviously, it can be at times, unfortunately.
Yeah, and before moving on, just one more question.
Yeah, sure.
We dive into Remedy for All. Irati was asking before, does repurposed use require a new EMA evaluation and approval? And does it then require a new reimbursement validation in each country for that specific use?
That's a big question. Does it require? That depends on the country you're in and the rules there. The best practice that we're trying to strive for within Remedy for All is absolutely trying to get repurposed medicines to be on label, which means securing a marketing authorization from a regulator like the European Medicines Agency, the EMA. So in that instance, what you're trying to do is develop clinical evidence that allows you to secure that marketing authorization. Currently, to have a company that's willing to hold that marketing authorization and then allow them to bring the drug to market. In most cases, that probably wouldn't lead to the price increasing, but there are situations where that could lead to that. But that hopefully gives you the best chance at even access for the drug anywhere that it's willing to pay for it. So if you're not seeing the price increase, you're hopefully going to have at least a similar level of access to what is seen currently in the country for that medicine at a different indication. Having said all that, if off-label prescription is something which is an option within your territory or country, then there are people that are moving towards trying to find ways to generate off-label prescription of a medicine through repurposing studies. And that is a viable route in some cases, but there are complexities there, which I could talk about for quite a few minutes. And I don't want to derail things too much at this stage, but really happy to go back into that topic towards the end, if that's helpful. So yeah, the final tool on the patient engagement, patient centricity side of the conversation is having a patient engagement plan, and that really is a tool we've tried to structure to give us, firstly, a good understanding of the current disease landscape for patients. We have to know what we think we know so we can test that with the community. Secondly, then saying how we think we're generally going to try and engage with that community effectively and what role the champions will play, PAGs will play. Thirdly, actually having individual plans, what are the logistical requirements, the timelines, the resources we need to really effectively engage, understand what that patient need is. And then finally, trying to develop those projects moving forward and assess how effective they are. And all of these four tools combined hopefully give us the right ways to truly understand what the needs are in the community to make sure drug repurposing projects we develop in Remedy for actually are tailored to that patient requirement and need. All of this then feeds into this core structure of our research, which is around a repurposing development team. And this is really similar to that MDT structure you often see in care provision within rare diseases, but trying to make sure there's a team around a project that has all the different experience you might need to bring a drug through to market. And within Remedy for All, we have the core project team, which would include that patient champion as well as the principal investigator of a clinical trial or a research program. We then have a core Remedy for All team who are there to support and guide the research program and provide the resources of Remedy for All to help that investigation. And that includes a chair of the repurposing development team itself. And then finally, a range of experts that are available to help the project move forward. And that almost always includes someone who knows about health economics, patient engagement, regulation, pharmacology, clinical trials, and preclinical work. So a real breadth of knowledge to help move projects to completion. And these are all guided by this document I mentioned earlier, the target product profile. This is a technical term. It's a document that's been used in industry, but the aim is really simple. It's meant to give a target, a bullseye that we're aiming for. It should tell people that are developing a product what are the key parameters we need to achieve to make this something that can really benefit the patient at the end and therefore have a chance to actually reach market and be useful and accessible to the patients. So within this document, we want to understand what the patients need need from a treatment, what benefits they want to see. We want to understand what the core scientific rationale is and what mechanisms we need to be understanding to make sure this can reach there. We want to know what data is currently available and what extra data we need to generate to allow us to reach regulatory approval. We want to know what that route to market for the drug is, who's going to hold their marketing authorization, who's going to sell it, what might the packaging look like, what might the mode of delivery be, how can that actually then reach the patients themselves to deliver the impact. And this document you set out at the start of a program, it evolves as you're going, but it keeps you focused on what the outcome is, which is patient benefit and the route to deliver that effectively. So as a quick example, one of our demonstrators is in the rare condition multisulfidase deficiency. We're looking to repurpose a drug called tazorotene into this space. And here the champion's been really key in shaping the program in a really effective manner. So that champion has helped us to deliver structured focus groups and interviews with the patient community, particularly with carers and even those that have unfortunately lost their children in this devastating rare condition. That guidance helped to feed into our regulatory engagement and scientific advice process and helped to convince the regulator that their concerns around the medicine being used, having side effects that would essentially lead to reduced growth in those patients were not relevant or meaningful in this community, because actually this disease is very devastating. It leads to high mortality and there's already reduced growth anyway. It's not a concern at this stage for the patient and shouldn't prevent the development of the drug. This itself was a really big impact for us. Our champion has also been pivotal in engaging with industry colleagues and allowed us to access a huge amount of data on an existing repurposed medicine, which really has streamlined the clinical development pathway for us. So hopefully we have a chance of delivering a single pivotal clinical trial and ambition as a consequence of that data these helped us to access. So it really shows the power of that champion model and how they can drive the research forward. So at this stage, I'll pause if people have any other questions on the broad approach to Remedy for All, and Megan can take you through more of the training work we do.
There's a question from Lori in the chat. If we know a research team working on drug repurposing for a specific disease, is it useful to connect them with Remedy for All if no link exists yet?
Yes. It's a simple answer, absolutely. So we have a platform within Remedy for All, our website, called the Repurposing Concierge. And if that researcher were to reach out to the concierge, it's a very short form to fill in about their project. And I think we guarantee that we'll have at least a half an hour call with that researcher to discuss their project to see if there are any obvious ways we could help or support them drive that forward. And I think we've had over 200 calls, maybe even getting towards 300 calls at this stage with different projects in this landscape. Just giving some basic advice, or in some cases actually working to collaborate with those projects in the future.
There's another question from Blair. Is that only for European researchers?
No, in other words, we are definitely funded by the EC and have to have a European focus. I obviously sit in the UK, which is its own unique and unusual relationship with the EU now, and we're part of this, but we are collaborating as globally as we can. We've engaged with people in South America, in the US, obviously. I believe there's been some engagement now with teams in Malaysia too. So we're really open to an international collaboration on this. We don't believe there should be boundaries in rare disease, and we certainly don't believe there should be geographical boundaries in repurposing either.
And Cindy, I think regarding the concierge, she's asking what concrete will help them forward. So I guess she means how the concierge is going to help these researchers.
Yeah, it's hard to say on any given project, but generally speaking, the concierge calls are taken by our team at eArtris. They're a translational research institute who drive forward the Remedy for All program and coordinate it. So they have huge and extensive experience and networks in the translational research space. What we generally see is translating ideas, scientific ideas, to patient impact is really challenging, and there are many barriers. So it could be very simple, like knowing a connection who's working in this field, who might be able to help do a drug screening. It might be connecting them to someone who can give them regulatory advice. It might be giving actual advice on how to think about going for scientific advice or structuring that. There's lots of small ways that can help just break some of those barriers and smooth the process, right through through to actually ultimately trying to say, okay, this project is something that we'd like to work with you on, to access funding with you, and to try and actually research together to take this drug to market. And we need to wait and see how those things develop.
Great. There are no further questions for now.
Brilliant. Then I'll pass on to Megan to tell you a bit about the training that we're doing within Remedy Fall as well.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I'm going to talk through our Repurposing Academy, which is our training resource that we have developed to support a range of stakeholders in repurposing projects, end-to-end pathway. So why do we need this? Well, we essentially want to improve the repurposing ecosystem to help more repurposed drugs reach patients. We know that we can't help every single individual project do this by itself. So we have created training to share the knowledge and experience of the consortium. We've got a whole range of experts from policy, regulators, people who work with patient groups, things like this, who can bring in their expertise to support projects outside of the consortium. Ultimately, what we want to do is break silos in the repurposing ecosystem by introducing a curriculum that targets multiple stakeholders and also fosters collaboration. So that's the main aim of the platform. And like I said, we want to train the world's drug repurposers. So our Repurposing Academy offers a range of training resources designed to provide a comprehensive understanding of the drug repurposing landscape. So you can see here that the resources we offer is quite varied. We have an online resource, we do deliver webinars, we do in-person training, we do short training called boot camps, we do long residential training called hackathons. We make sure that it's varied in terms of how it's delivered. So this can be live, on demand, in person, virtual. We also feed our live training into our on demand and virtual trainings as well. And the last thing that I want to say from this slide is that the intended audience, as you can see, is varied. We have tried to create training that can be delivered to patient groups, to academics, to clinicians, basically everyone involved in the repurposing landscape. So our core training tool is our digital academy. This is an open access online resource that we built to empower the next generation of drug repurposers. So the Digital Academy was built to equip researchers with tools and expertise needed to transform existing drugs into breakthrough treatments. So we tried to make sure that we covered all of the steps of drug repurposing end to end. So we've got 7 core modules covering an introduction, the target product profile, finding a repurposing candidate, preclinical development, clinical development, regulation, and securing patient access. We also created foundation modules, which basically create a base on which to build a drug repurposing project and enable the users to think beyond the science. So considering things like funding, project management, how to work with patients, who to collaborate with to drive projects forward. So this is kind of the core visual aspect, the core tool from our Digital Academy. It's our route to repurposing figure, and it's an interactive diagram that offers a visual representation of the drug repurposing pathway. So we wanted to basically show visually the whole process of drug repurposing, think about how things fit together, what comes in different stages, when to do things, and how it's all linked. So the idea being that the process isn't necessarily linear. You have to consider different things, and you can think about this as a linear process, but also you can think about this as, I'm at this stage, what do I need to do next? Next slide, Rick, I think. So yeah, like I said, it's a key tool. Basically, you can use this tool how you feel would best suit you. So if you wanted to go from from the intro, work it all the way through to regulation. It's designed in a way that you can do that, but it's also designed in a way that you could explore one area that you're struggling with. So it enables you to zoom in on particular topics and you could focus on that topic and you wouldn't necessarily need all the context from the modules beforehand to be able to understand it. And I think there's one more slide on it. So you go forward, Eric. Thank you. Yeah. So basically we've tried to make our repurposing training accessible. So we've used language that is accessible to different audiences. We've got glossary functions. So if you don't know what something means, you can just hover over the word and it will tell you that as well. So we've tried to make it as accessible as we possibly can. So we also deliver live training. So we've delivered webinars, boot camps, and hackathons. So our repurposing boot camps are short in-person training events that provide the chance to meet others in the repurposing field, engage with experts, discuss topics on repurposing. We've so far delivered an academic boot camp, and we've also delivered a patient boot camp, bringing together everyone on repurposing, a short 1 to 2 day training, taking you through the drug repurposing pathway, through lectures, discussions, interactive sessions as well. And I've just seen in the chat, is there an upcoming patient bootcamp in 2026? Yes, there is. Date not confirmed. I believe we are sticking with November, but
Yeah, early November, I think.
yeah. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. We'll be promoting that hopefully shortly. And then just the next slide, please, Rick. So yeah, we also deliver and have delivered a hackathon. So in October, we had 14 early career researchers from different institutions across Europe that joined us in Barcelona for a week-long residential training, basically put into teams and given a drug repurposing challenge to solve. We are also running this again in 2026. So this is a really great chance to get early career researchers together in a room to think about repurposing, and again to not just think about science, but to think beyond that, to think about patient collaboration, to think about regulation, to think about routes to market. So that's another really great week as well. And then I think so just finally, what does the future hold for training for this platform? So we've got this fully functional platform which allows us to deliver repurposing training to specific audiences on topics that they need. And we want to continue to collaborate and highlight the work and the knowledge of different packages in the consortium who have different expertise. We do these live events that we can then generate more digital content for to feed back into our academy. So if you go on the academy, you can have access to recordings from our live events, you can have access to webinars that we've delivered, things like that. And then we're going to focus on the planning and delivery of new content as the academy evolves, increasing depth over the second half of the project. And also, we like to collaborate as well with different groups that have similar goals. So we work a lot with Sympathic and Repo for EU to align our work and collaborate and make sure that all of our platforms are coming together for the same goal. And I think that's the end of the training. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer them before Rick moves on to case studies.
I don't think there are any questions related to the training. I already mentioned in the chat that when the call for applications for your bootcamp is live, we'll make sure to share it with our alumni. I know that last year some of our participants in the school also attended the bootcamp and their feedback said it was fantastic. So yeah, looking forward to share the call with them. But there is a question from Michael from before. It's not related to training though. He says, does Beacon works with Unravel Bioscience, who's studying which medicines could be repurposed using AI and swaps from rare disease patients collected from all over the world?
No, I haven't come across Unravel actually. There's a lot of different companies out there that we have engaged with doing different things in the field of AI, whether that's looking at patient medical records, whether that's looking at omic data. But no, I haven't come across another level. So yeah, I mean, happy to hear the name. I'll have a look into it and see if we can find ways to engage in what we're doing. There's lots of companies trying to find ways to do this kind of thing at the moment, and the thing that I always recommend the patient organizations do when investigating these companies is just have a think about what the outcome is that you get from their AI platform, and are you in a position where you can really begin to make the most of that outcome at this stage. It's great to get those different repurposing ideas, but what you want is quality repurposing ideas, and know that you have a way to then move that towards clinic, so you can really test it in patients. So not saying I don't know anything about what they're doing, whether that's good or not, but I think it's a useful thing to be aware of. There's lots of people trying to find ways to do this right now, and that's the kind of thing that I think is crucial to decide whether you want to engage with them in your work or not. But thank you for flagging it. I appreciate it. Any more, Marta?
No. He's written a follow-up on the chat saying Richard Novak from Unravel Bioscience is really great and has already samples from patients affected by ZTTK.
It's cool. It's a nice model if you're taking samples directly from a patient. So I know some of the issues that companies have found in the past is generating high quality data or omic data to work with. So they've obviously built a model which means they can access and generate that themselves, which is a nice piece in that model. So definitely worth following up with. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to talk now, kind of in our final piece in the presentation, a bit about some repurposing case studies. We've hopefully given a summary of why you should care about repurposing, why it's a topic you should look at, giving you a sense of what kind of information and support is available from Remedy for All, our consortium, whether that's actually delivering the research or upskilling yourselves or researchers you're working with on the space. But hopefully this last piece just tells you, well, what can this generate? What difference can this make to a given rare condition? So I think case studies are really vital for this kind of piece. It helps us to understand what we can do in a given rare disease, what's happened before, and therefore what the impact really can be on patients with repurposing when it happens. What potential does the approach have for your given condition? But it also crucially highlights the challenges, and no one, and certainly not I, would be willing to tell you it's an easy path. Any repurposing research is still a challenging process, just as any drug development is. I'm sure those of you on that course are learning. But by examining the challenges others have faced, we can begin to see their solutions and hopefully learn from those in a way that helps us improve future repurposing efforts. And a thing that's particularly interesting to me and hopefully to this audience is the role that patient groups have played in some of these examples and how they've been able to support these successful repurposing efforts and had a pivotal role, in fact, in driving them through to impact for the patient themselves. So that's hopefully what we're going to touch on across the two examples now. So the first of those is a condition you may well have heard of. It's an ultra-rare genetic disease called alkaptonuria, or AKU, or black bone disease. So, as I say, it's ultra-rare, affects roughly 1 in a quarter of a million of the general population. So really small population size, although, as I say, inherited genetic, and it actually is effectively a metabolic disorder. It's caused by a single point mutation in an enzyme. That enzyme therefore stops functioning, and that leads to a knock-on effect within a metabolic pathway that leads to the buildup of an acid within the body. That acid is homogentisic acid, and this kind of builds up gradually over time and begins to attack bone and cartilages throughout the body and throughout life. So this means the disease is progressive, and actually early on in life it has a little symptomatic impact, but as people progress into their mid-20s and onwards, they begin to see more damage there, which leads to an early and severe form of osteoarthritis, as well as calcification of cartilages, particularly around the heart, which can be life-limiting. Patients themselves tend to experience multiple joint replacements throughout life. Within AKU, there's certain symptoms that you can see in what they call the AKU tetrad in this image at the top. The blue discoloration in the cartilages in the ears are common. You get these black eye spots within the white sclera of the eyes. You can see there a slightly more gruesome image of a joint replacement surgery where you can see the ends of the bones actually have completely turned black through this action of the acid. And a big trigger and diagnostic trigger for AKU is that urine will turn black on contact with air. which is quite a distinctive thing and an easy sign to see if an individual is overproducing or has an excess of homogenetic acid in the body. So within AKU, then there's a relatively simple metabolic pathway. Apologies, these things never look particularly simple, but there's a direct line between amino acid, phenylalanine, and how it is essentially removed from the body. And what we can see is the drug nitisinone interacts on this pathway. This is also an existing approved treatment for another rare condition, tyrosinemia type 1, which acts on this very pathway here. In tyrosinemia patients, they pass away very early in their life, I think within the first or second year of life, if they're untreated due to the buildup of this phenylacetic acid or the acetone. But within AKU, we can see that nitisinone acts just before that part of the pathway. So in alkaptonuria patients, you see a buildup of this homogenetic acid because this enzyme is broken. But if you give those patients nitisinone, theoretically, you stop the getting to that stage, and we just lead to the elimination of homogenetic acid. It's not built, it's not made in the body. So if you don't make it, it can't build up. And theoretically, that should mean you shouldn't have any of the symptoms of AKU because you no longer have the acid being produced that's causing the problems. So this is a really nice, simple scientific hypothesis about why this drug repurposing should make a difference to this patient population. This is something other people had seen for a number of years, and actually there was a trial done on this mechanism and this drug in alkaptonuria in the US, but unfortunately that trial failed. Now, trial failure can be really for one of two broad reasons. One is that the drug doesn't work. The other is that the trial doesn't work. The trial was poorly designed. It didn't allow you to detect whether the drug was functioning properly. And it was the opinion of the AKU Society in the UK, and this is Professor Ranganath, who's a researcher who began to specialize in AKU, that the trial design here was problematic. In particular, this trial was hinged around a single endpoint, which is range of motion about the hip joint, if I'm not mistaken. And they were therefore trying to see if dosing patients with the drug nitisinone would improve the range of motion of those patients at the hip joint. What we're talking about here is people who've been living with alkaptonuria for many years, who've had degradation of the bones and the joints there, and severe osteoarthritic symptoms, and given the drug that stops the buildup of the acid that's attacking their bones. I think at best you'd expect that to stop things getting worse rather than massively improve things, and you expect that the symptoms might hit any part of the body or any joint, not necessarily the hip. So what we're seeing here is the endpoint doesn't really give you a good insight into what the drug is doing. So based on this, the AKU Society in the UK, with Professor Ranganath, decided to try and give this another chance and invested heavily in the AKU research ecosystem. So they were able to raise funds to conduct the first autopsy in AKU to really better understand the total effects of alkaptonuria on the body and the condition itself. They were able to develop a new alkaptonuria mouse model to test drugs in there to see what the impact was in a model system. They also developed their own endpoint, one that was more effective and based on their earlier research to assess the kind of holistic impact of this acid across the whole body, and began to understand the effects on the heart that I mentioned earlier, as well as the wider range of joints, on the gait, etc. They were able to use this as a trial endpoint that really captured the full impact of this condition on the body, and therefore the full impact of a drug if it were to help. Based on a lot of their work, they were able to secure funding from the NHS in England to deliver a specialist centre for alkaptonuria in the UK. And that centre legally had written into its statutes to prescribe the drug nitisinone to those patients in an off-label setting. So hinting back to that question earlier. And this allowed them effectively to run a real-world data study on the impact of nitisinone on that population of, in this case, English patients. This wasn't their main work, though. What they actually did was to build an international consortium to run a clinical trial. And that consortium included the company that held the patent for the drug, nitisinone. This was Sobi, as well as a clinical research organisation to help support and coordinate and run an international multi-centre clinical trial in alkaptonuria. Because of this consortium and this body of work and evidence they put together, they were able to secure funding from the European Union to run a phase 2 and a phase 3 clinical trial. And that was designed to assess the efficacy of nitisinone in alkaptonuria using this whole range of tools they put together. They also went to the EMA beforehand for scientific advice, so really trying to make sure that you collect the evidence that's required to get that license changed that we talked about earlier to someone, in this case, Sobi, could hold them a marketing authorization for nitisinone. The EMA surprisingly advised them that they would be happy to approve a license just for a change in a biomarker, in this case for a significant change in the levels of homogenetic acid in patients, which is surprising as generally they're looking for patient relevant outcomes. The team decided to look for patient relevant outcomes anyway, particularly because that would be helpful to secure access in terms of reimbursement within markets globally. What they were able to do in this situation, because the Alzheimer's Society was an integral part of the consortium, they took on a huge level of responsibility around patient recruitment and retention. And they were able to recruit over 140 patients for their phase 3 study. This is, again, an ultra rare condition affecting about 1.25 million people. This is an exceptionally large study for ultra rare diseases. And that also mostly excluded English patients who were already receiving the drug off label within the National Centre. With one of the sites being based in England, that's again challenging. They also had an interesting challenge to overcome around that signal of urine that I talked about earlier. This was a study that had to have a control arm, so a group that weren't on drug. However, anyone who was receiving the drug nitisinone no longer had their urine turning black because it was so effective at producing homogenetic acid production. That means the patients knew if they were on the drug straight away, so it couldn't be a blinded placebo-controlled trial. So despite the fact that they had about 70 of those 140 patients not on drug, they retained these patients in the study for over 3 years due to the interaction and work of the AKU Society in communicating the importance of this research to their patient base. So it's a huge achievement, an amazing achievement, to be honest. Ultimately, they were able to complete the trial, which was amazing in itself. And they also were able to achieve all of their endpoints, essentially showing that the drug nitisinone improved marginally the range of motion, the symptoms that patients were experiencing over that 3-year trial period, which was surpassed their own expectation, as well as reducing the presence of the drug in their bloodstream, of homogeneous acid in the bloodstream by about over 98%, which again is a huge change and really significant clinically. This data meant the drug has been approved and licensed in the EMA, in the UK, in the FDA, in many cases around the world, and is actually now accessible and reimbursed in the majority of nations, I believe in the EU at least, to provide the first approved treatment for alkaptonuria. And it's a really significant achievement, repurposing a drug driven through that patient engagement. So hopefully a great example of what can be achieved with this kind of structure. The second example, I'll walk you through. Yes,
there's a question from Cindy, I think regarding the previous case. How long does the total process take?
Do you mean the total process of the clinical trial or the washout of the drug in that situation, Cindy?
From the first step.
The first step for AKU.
And also until the last bullet point today.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't tell you perfectly off the top of my head, but I think we are talking about around 12 years they were working on this. So it's a prolonged process because they were building and improving the data in the ecosystem first, then securing the funding. The clinical trial funding, I believe, ran for a 5-year window, and then they were working for about 2 years to get some of the access piece. So in truth, it's still ongoing to make sure the access is as widely available as it should be.
Yeah, it gives hope.
It does.
Okay.
We'll take it. We'll take it, but again, it should be quicker in an ideal world.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your answer.
There's another question. There's another question from Irati. She says, perhaps I misunderstood. Was the trial 3 years long and 50% of the patients remained on placebo for that whole period?
You did not misunderstand. Yes, for the phase 3 study, they ran for 3 years, and they were recommended by scientific advice they would have to have a control arm. There was no placebo. Placebo was effectively pointless, but they were basically a group of patients who were on their supportive care and receiving really good care from the specialist centres in Liverpool, Paris, and Slovakia. But they were not on any drug, and they retained for that period, which is crazy, to be honest.
And why? What's the justification for that? Like from an ethical point of view?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Was there no natural history data, for example, to justify maybe a smaller percentage of placebo or a smaller, shorter trial time?
So I think if this were to go to scientific advice today, I think it would be far more likely you could have a small control arm or a more hybrid model where you might have patients working for maybe a year to look at disease progress before moving on to drug. I think at the time this was put together, we're probably talking 10 years back now. The advice from the EMA was that they still wanted to move towards the kind of, quotes unquote, gold standard clinical trial design approach. While it was clear that they couldn't effectively use a placebo here, they wanted to have that high level of control arm to have strong comparative data. And that was the sample size they were targeting. So, I think it's a really fair question if that's ethically reasonable. I've talked to a number of patients who I know were sat for 3 years not receiving drug that could be benefiting them, where their AKU was getting worse, and that's a real challenge. But in that scenario, I think it's amazing that the level of retention that was able to be produced. I believe they lost 2 patients across a 3-year period. I think that's it, which is it's hard to fathom really.
The only place I thought she was a little bit weak was the Ross.
Okay. I shall move on to the last example. Perfect. So this final example is with tuberous sclerosis complex. This is another rare disease, but nowhere near as rare as alkaptonuria. What you can see is it affects around 1 in 10,000 people worldwide. And that leads to the development of a range of different benign tumours, but these can generate different symptomatic effects. So you can see that tumours form on the skin, kidneys, within the brain and the lung. The brain tumours, SAGAs, can lead to a range of epilepsy issues and neurocognitive problems. And in the UK, there's what the Tuberous Sclerosis Association, but there are a range of other associations across Europe. And I mentioned TSA has had a pivotal role in how this program was moved forward. So with TSC, there was a program essentially that began with fundamental academic research. And these were academic researchers just trying to work out what is the underlying mechanism for this condition, because they are academics and like to ask these kind of questions. But this fundamental research actually led to a clear answer, and they identified the mTOR pathway has been pivotal to the development of the disease, tuberous sclerosis. But on that pathway, there are a number of different drugs that are quite well known and shown to be effective in modulating that pathway, inhibiting that pathway, these mTOR pathway inhibitors. And rather than just leaving it there and having their publication and moving on, these researchers decided they need to try and do something with this connection and try and suggest to develop a first-in-human study to see if this mTOR inhibition pathway could make an impact on the patients themselves. They therefore put in a proposal to the UK Medical Research Council to try and secure funding to run an open-label study within tuberous sclerosis. Unfortunately, that trial was rejected. They were trying to use a widely available low-cost generic drug in this situation, and the funding wasn't granted. And again, normally that will be the end of the story. However, through interaction with the Tuberous Sclerosis Association that I mentioned, they recognised there may be some other options to try forward funding. So between direct charity funding and securing up what I believe was a Welsh government grant, they managed to pull together enough funding to deliver a small open label phase 2 clinical trial study in some of the kidney tumours that affected a number of patients in tuberous sclerosis. Now, this generated enough evidence to interest a large pharmaceutical company in coming into this repurposing story. That company was Novartis, because they had an on-label a drug that was still under patent that had a very similar impact to the drug sirolimus, which they were testing in an open-label study, and that drug was called everolimus. So because their drug was still under patent, Novartis had incentive to try and work in this space. They essentially got involved in repurposing everolimus for tuberous sclerosis because they could access the benefits of orphan drug designation to help them leverage more returns from their existing investment in this drug, which they were, I believe, using for immunosuppressant for kidney transplantations. What this essentially meant was, by accessing the benefits of ODD, they could extend their marketing exclusivity for the drug from out to 2021, when the patent itself expired in 2013. So it's a really significant growth in period of exclusivity, and essentially a monopoly in selling this drug into the market. Huge financial value for the company, and makes that repurposing well worth investing in. Suffice to say, they conducted pretty large and extensive clinical trials, beginning, I believe, in the Sagas, the brain tumors, also working in the kidneys, and everolimus is now licensed and approved for a number of different tuberous sclerosis tumors as an on-label medication, which is fantastic and gives a meaningful therapeutic option to people living with tuberous sclerosis. In this case, based on that on-label drug, the cost was estimated at around £36,000 per patient per year. But again, these are figures I pulled together a number of years ago now, and that may well have changed significantly. What I will just note in this story, which is a really nice success story, which shows that collaboration between academia, patient organizations, and industry to bring a drug to market, is that if that original trial may have been funded with a generic drug and they had found a way to bring it to market, which is very hard, that the estimated generic cost for sirolimus, I once estimated as low as about £250 per patient per annum, which is a hugely different price to deliver healthcare benefits to the patient. But actually finding that route to market in that generic drug space is really challenging, and something that wasn't able to be delivered. So it's a nice success story. It shows the value of collaboration, but just hints at some of the challenges we still have in finding a way to effectively deliver low-cost medicines into rare diseases. To summarize, what can we learn from this and what we've presented today? Hopefully, it shows you that repurposing does have potential to provide meaningful disease-modifying treatments for rare diseases. And many people, when I talk to them, just say repurposing can just be used to manage symptoms, not to modify disease, and that just isn't true. There are absolutely cases and examples where you can modify underlying disease mechanisms and biology with a repurposed medicine. Why wouldn't there be? It also highlights the value of that partnership between the patient community, clinical researchers, funders, industry, to actually deliver medicines to patients. And that's vital to our success. But it's really true that the business case for repurposing, particularly medicines that are no longer on a patent, generic medicines, is really challenging. But there are ways that industry can get involved with the right incentives, and those particularly do exist for rare diseases. And then finally, hopefully you've seen that there are a growing number of different programs, incentives, initiatives that are trying to drive forward repurposing globally. I think Remedy for All is a really good example of that, and one that we're really actively trying to find new projects and ways to support the community. So please do explore it if you're thinking about repurposing. And I'd just say that I believe repurposing is a method of drug development that has real potential within the rare disease space, because it allows the barrier to entry for research for a rare disease to be that much lower from a financial resources perspective, and from a scientific perspective. That means that the work that your patient organisation is doing might manage to instigate some kind of research where no one else would look at it before, and that can get you on the map in the research space that can make a difference for your rare disease. So with that, I will say thank you, and I'm happy to take any further questions. Cheers.
Are there any questions for Rick or Megan? I don't see any questions in the chat. I'm just giving you a few minutes. Oh, Sarah has raised her hand. Sarah, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Rick. Your voice came in loud and clear, so that was wonderful. I was wide awake the entire session because it's very early in the morning here. But a question for you: the relationship between remedial and sympathic, are they all connected? Are you competing? I just would like to learn a little more. I'm joining the call from Canada. So of course I am exploring at the same time what are the Canadian connections. And I'm not seeing too many, and I would love for that to be different. But if you can just clarify the relationship between the ones that Megan mentioned earlier, are they connected? Are they competing?
That's a really good question. We're at this stage we're connected, and I think that's really positive. So both Remedy for All and Repo for You were funded at the same time through the same EC grant, and we're supported. And the EC are really trying to drive and encouraging that collaboration between the two projects. The two projects are quite different in how they're structured, which I think is a strength, to be honest with you, because it means we have quite distinct approaches. Repo for You are really focusing on some of that. Kind of systems biology, early AI approaches to finding repurposing opportunities. Whereas I think we're much more focused on the kind of holistic process of repurposing and how you drive the impact to patients within repurposing opportunities and manage those projects through to delivery. So that means we've talked to each other at conferences, we invite them there. We have, I believe, at least annual, but probably more regular meetings across there. And similarly with Sympathic, we're both funded by the EU. We're working with them and trying to collaborate where possible. I've said currently because there will be a world at some stage where we're going out on our own without EU funding, and then it becomes more of a thing where you're trying to find money. And then there may be places where there is some level of competition to find that funding, but I'm hoping that we can maintain the ecosystem in such a way that we are collaborative, synergistic kind of projects that support the ecosystem. But we'll have to see how that goes in another couple of years, Sarah. On the Canada point, love any recommendations. I think there are people we've been working with a little bit in Canada, but off the top of my head, I can't think of an obvious institution that pops out. I think is the Milken Institute tied through there? Was that someone we might have worked with? I'm not sure.
Yeah, and I'm part of a new network called Rare Kids Can. And so there's a number of individuals who have connected in with European partners. So we're emerging, we're new. I know CHEO, one of the hospitals in Ontario, close to Ottawa, has some connection. But yeah, what I find right now is limited. So I'm actually going to do some digging after this call to learn from some of our leads about that.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, love to hear more as well. So feel free to reach out to Megan and I about that. Thank you.
Are there any further questions? From my part, I'm going to gather all the links shared in the chat today and put them on the training web pages so you have them all accessible for you. And also, as promised, once the call for applications for the bootcamp is open, I'm going to share it with everyone so you can be the first to apply. And finally, the session is being recorded, as you know, and we'll upload the recording and the slides to the training webpage so you can revisit it later. And just a final reminder before we wrap up, please send me your profile pics as soon as possible so I can add them to the booklet, and it will be easier for everybody during the training schools to connect with each other if there is your face next to your bio description. All right. Yeah, excellent session as always, Rick and Megan. Thank you very much for sharing all these resources and introduction to drug repurposing. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. And with this, I think we can finish here and see you all during the next webinar. All right? Okay.
Thank you all. Enjoy.